Cold in particular is of concern because cold loves the uterus, and cold over time creates a lot of hormonal imbalances. And they say that the first 40 days postpartum sets you up for 40 days of long-term health. I'm sorry, 40 years. Ooh, 40 years, not 40 days. So 40 days of postpartum sets you up for 40 years of health. And if you think about what that means, it ensures that we, when the time comes, have a smoother shift into menopause.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Nuchi podcast, where we celebrate the power of Eastern wellness. I'm your host, Stephanie Tan. Today, I'm joined by the incredible Hana Miller, coach, intuitive healer, and creator of Awaken the Healer Within and The Balanced Woman. In this episode, we talk about her personal healing journey, the unexpected challenges of pregnancy, and how Chinese medicine became a powerful guide in her life. From yuezi to Bell's palsy, this is a beautiful conversation about coming back to balance on every level. Let's dive in. Hey, Hana, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us today on our episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's so good to reconnect with you and be here with you today.
Yeah, and last time on your podcast, I feel like we had such a great conversation, and I'm so excited to have you here today. So let's just dive in. Hana, can you tell us a little bit take us back to the beginning and how you first found your way to traditional Chinese medicine and eventually to your work you do now as an acupuncturist and as a creator of The Balanced Woman?
Wow. Oh my gosh, the beginning. It's a big question, right? It's a long, multifaceted journey, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. I grew up struggling with quite a few health issues. I fell out of a two-story window when I was 3 and almost died, and afterwards developed a pretty severe fainting and seizure disorder. And so I spent a lot of time in and out of the hospital and the emergency room. And I think for anyone who has health issues, we naturally start to seek the things that will help us heal. So my mother is Chinese Hawaiian, and in addition to taking the Western route and seeing a lot of doctors and specialists trying to get to, the core reason why this was happening, we also grew up seeing acupuncturists, herbalists, and a whole litany of incredible healers. So that really was my path. And again, it became just this personal passion and borderline obsession at many different stages. When it came time to decide what I wanted to do in college, I ended up pursuing the Western medicine route, not really knowing what Eastern medicine looked like as a career, as a profession. And so I was still really struggling with my health at that time. Even though I'd seen so many people, I finally met this incredible acupuncturist who not only treated my physical body, she really treated my spirit and let me speak to things that previously I had so much difficulty talking about. And she kind of woke me up to the reality that it wasn't just my physical health that was struggling. It was my emotional, mental, spiritual health that was really, really struggling as well. And that experience with her, I'd been fainting and having seizures at that point for about 17 years. And after one session with her, I stopped. She, again, really kind of woke me up to the fact that there was so much more. And so while I continued to pursue my background in Western medicine in my undergraduate, I also concurrently completed a 2-year holistic health certification. And once school was over and everyone was applying to med school and kind of choosing their next step, it just didn't feel right. There was something about it that didn't feel totally right, because I knew that there was much, much more to healing and medicine than just, surgery, antibiotics, steroids, birth control. And so I stepped away from education for a few years and took my time to be very lost and very confused as to what I was doing with my life. But it really was my own personal healing journey, and taking my own struggles and letting those things guide me and lead me, first to Western medicine, then to Eastern medicine, holistic healing, and then to the Peruvian Amazon, where I spent quite a few months on and off over the course of the last 8 years, apprenticing under healers there to learn about indigenous medicine. And then ultimately it led me back to Chinese medicine, right? We always kind of end where we begin. And I went back to school to get my master's in Chinese medicine to become an acupuncturist. And I started my private practice, but same thing, like I just felt that there was so much more that I could offer women outside of the treatment room.
Yeah.
Because as you know, like the information is so valuable and so effective and it benefits everyone that I really wanted it to be accessible to everyone. So
Mm.
I created an online program, which is the Balanced Woman, and it teaches women how to heal themselves physically, emotionally, spiritually, how to identify what they need uniquely on their healing path, and and more importantly, how do you actually do that? So
Mm.
it became whole holistic world that again started with my own need to learn how to heal holistically, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And then, of course, in relationships, our sense of life purpose. And it's just bloomed and evolved from there into an online program and in-person retreats and an apprenticeship. And we just kind of let things unfold as they're meant to.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And can you tell me a little bit about the balanced woman? What kind of women come to you, and what do you see most of?
Yeah, I love that question. Mostly because I love my women. I love my women. I really meet women when they're at the threshold of major change, when they feel like
Mm.
they are no longer satisfied with their health, with their relationships, with the things that they've been struggling with for, many of them for decades, for years and years and years. I really specialize in chronic imbalances, whether it's being unhappy physically with hormonal imbalances, infertility, I mean, excess weight, insufficient weight, but that disconnect from their physical body, chronic pain. Ooh, a lot of pain. Yeah. Women come to me for pain and suffering. And then the
Mhm.
emotional side of things. Women come to me for anxiety, depression, anger, also like dissatisfaction in their relationships, difficulty communicating, and feeling unfulfilled in their work and in their life purpose. Right? I mean, it's everything. That's why it's such a funny question to answer because any disharmony or imbalance in our life affects us not just in one dimension. It starts to affect us in every dimension of our health and our well-being.
Mhm. And among the different women, I think you mentioned there's so many different reasons why people come to you, but is there something that comes together that is actually each woman is actually experiencing in their different forms? Is there something that you can tell them, guide them into ways that they can help themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I offer women like the tools and the knowledge to essentially rebuild themselves from the ground up. So we start with their physical body and ensure that they're eating the right types of foods for their unique constitution from an elemental perspective. I mean, you know that Chinese medicine is highly individualized. So based on whether they're a fire type, earth type, metal, water, or wood, and also based on what are they struggling with uniquely? Chronic migraine, I mean, jaw tension, PMS, infertility, chronic low back pain, chronic UTIs, I mean, rashes, acne, you name it. We see it, but we start with food and ensure that they understand what they need uniquely for their unique body type. And then we layer in movement. So every week that I work with a woman, we gradually but steadily, you start to create momentum. We start with food, we move on to movement, and then we really set the stage for them to do that deeper emotional work, which, like in Chinese medicine, the emotions live in the body. So developing that initial relationship and intelligence with their body allows them to do the deeper emotional work. And that really is in the second month. They move through a series of practices to move emotional stagnation and learn how to master these emotions that maybe previously mastered them. I mean, how often do you hear that? Like, oh, like I'm overcome with anxiety. I can't control my anger. I'm so frustrated. Versus like, what is this anxiety trying to teach me? Show me. How can I work with it? How can I grow from it? Where is this anger coming from? Why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? But more importantly, like, how can I work with it? And yeah, so it all builds. When we know ourselves, and to answer your question, when we know ourselves, we know who we are physically, we understand our energy, our hormonal cycle. We understand our family, our upbringing, why we are the way that we are. We have a clear roadmap and a clear compass that can direct us to what does it feel like to actually be in balance, and how do I take control of that and actually occupy the driver's seat of my own health and my own life.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I think that for a lot of women, it's hard to go back and it's hard to go so deep and go into the roots and to connect with that, right? So I love that you're empowering women to do this because it's so hard to take the time for ourselves to really dive deep. And it's scary, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, to do it in a way that doesn't feel so scary, because it is scary, right? And to know ourselves, whew, there's a wild world in there.
And I love that you can make it approachable because I think that you're bringing all these different things that, you know, in traditional Chinese medicine, a lot of these concepts are very different. You touched on different constitutions. And I think that that's a lot for people to understand, right? And even though there's simple concepts, right? But when you layer them on, it gets confusing, but you really bring that together to make it approachable for women.
Yeah, we have to, because I mean, how it's so complex. Chinese medicine is unbelievably complicated because frankly, like human beings are pretty complicated. And I think that's where we get lost in the weeds of just trying to understand ourselves and why we feel the way that we feel, why we're so exhausted, why we're overwhelmed, why we don't feel like energized or good. And it really has been my mission to make it accessible, make it applicable, make it something that you don't just know, but you can actually apply and immediately benefit from.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because women, I think we need to invest in our long-term health. But in today's world, we do want to see, some sort of gratifications, instant benefits for us to keep on investing into that to build up for that long-term health. And I think that's so important. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your birth journey. Listen to a little bit of it, and I just found it so powerful. And I think that, you know, if you could talk a little bit about your birthing journey, and then I would love to talk about after, because I think we had a very similar, I had a C-section as well, and I had a confinement nanny that helped with a lot of the soups and teas and nourishment. So yeah, I would love to have our audience really hear that journey.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was a big one. Pregnancy alone is quite a journey. And even though birth and labor and delivery is a short journey, it feels even bigger than pregnancy, even more formative. And I'm 6 months postpartum now. My baby just turned 6 months last week, and we had planned for a home birth and had done our due diligence and knew that it was right for us. I don't have particularly strong opinions about what other women do. I just know like what feels right for me, and that really felt right for us. To labor at home, to ideally deliver at home. And when I first got pregnant, I said to my husband and I said to myself, like, I want to experience the fullest expression of pregnancy, labor, and delivery. I want to feel, I want to know like what my body is capable of, what it was designed by nature to do. Part of me wishes I hadn't said that, because I feel like I, I brought that into reality, and I had an incredibly intense labor. Contractions were, 2 to 3 minutes apart, starting from the very beginning, and remained incredibly intense for the full 14 hours. It brought me to my knees. Everything that I did to prepare, there is nothing that could have prepared me for it. I've had a strong meditation practice my entire life. I did the best that I possibly could. I've worked with so many women throughout this experience. But for me, it's like everything went out the window. Everything, everything that you think you know about yourself kind of goes out the window in the face of something as intense as that. And I had expected, being a first-time mother, that labor would start off a little bit slow, that I'd have time to let that oxytocin release and prepare myself. And I'd read so many birth stories and listened to so many birth stories from clients over the years and asked so many questions, but it was like stepping onto a roller coaster. I was not expecting it to be so intense right from the beginning. My body, according to my midwife, when I asked her about it after the fact, she just said, your body is incredibly efficient. It knew what to do. It wanted to get the baby out. And he crowned at 14 hours and his head broke my water. And we called our midwife and told her, like, I think the baby's coming. And she got there and looked at me, looked at my husband and said, where do you want to have this baby? Because you're not going to have time to fill the tub. You're not going to have time to get in it. Like, the baby's coming right now. And so she saw him crown. I felt him, but then he receded back up into my womb and turned breech. And I labored for another 2 hours before we realized what happened. And at that moment, contractions were a minute apart. I was fully dilated, but our midwife said, like, you can deliver the baby breech, even though he's head down, or even though he's been head down this entire time, like, he's not in position anymore. You can deliver him this way, but we're looking at several more hours of labor, and the risks associated with it are high. It's an automatic transfer to the hospital. There's the concern that the umbilical cord will prolapse and he'll be deprived of oxygen. There's the concern that he'll break his collarbone on the way out. There's the concern that he'll have hip dysplasia, that his head will get stuck because it didn't make room for the rest of his body to come. She said, so he's happy right now. Your blood pressure's low, your heart rate's in a good place, his heart rate's in a good place. What do you want to do? Because if you go to the hospital, it will be an emergency C-section. You're fully dilated. They'll probably put you under general anesthesia. And I remember just looking at my husband and I was like, I don't know. Like, I can't make this decision. I can't think. And, I wasn't able to eat or drink throughout the entirety of my labor because it was so intense that I couldn't keep anything down. So at that point, I hadn't eaten or drank anything in close to 24 hours.
Wow.
And I was spread thin. And I looked at him and I was like, I trust you. You're in the right mind. I'm not. You decide. And so he said, let's just go. Let's go. You're happy. The baby's happy and healthy. Like, why risk it? Even though you can do this, if you want to do this, I'll support you. Like, let's get the baby out. So bless my husband. I was screaming at the top of my lungs. you know all the ideas that I'd hoped for about birth being like this natural thing and envisioning flowers unfolding and all the things that you like hope for, that it's a gentle wave and you're gonna peak and crest, just again flew out the window. And I screamed like you see in movies. It came from somewhere. And I'm a pretty gnarly person, I don't talk about it much, but like I an incredibly high threshold for pain. I'm not particularly dramatic, but I screamed like there was no tomorrow. So I was in the back seat of the car, screaming because contractions were less than a minute apart. And my husband drove so calm, so quiet to the emergency room. Bless him. He's so steady. Whew, he's such a steady guy. And we got there, and my husband said it was like a NASCAR team, when they like take the tires off in like 50 seconds. They got me in, had me under general anesthesia, so they knocked me out, got the baby out, and he said that within 10 minutes they rolled the baby in. And, I woke up, I was on, a whole cocktail of pain medication, tramadol, fentanyl, morphine. And I woke up and I think the first thing I said was, he okay? And I remember it, but the next 2 days in the hospital were kind of a blur. But, I made it home, and to kind of segue into what we were talking about, coming home was like coming into that cocoon of the 40-day confinement. And the peace that met me there, the quiet, was, I think, one of the most necessary things I've ever done for myself after, frankly, what was pretty traumatic. And I really don't use that word very often, especially when it comes to myself, because I do have the tools and the knowledge and the experience to navigate some pretty heavy shit, given things that I've been through in my life. But now that, asking me about this 6 months postpartum, looking back and realizing like that was a traumatic birth. And I define trauma as anything that's beyond our capacity to cope with. And birth is such an expander. You expand and become so much more than you think you are. So, of course, there's no greater expander to our capacity than stepping into motherhood, right?
Yeah. Wow. That's so intense. And I can't even imagine going through that. And Hannah, can you tell me a little bit about your postpartum? What was that journey like? I know you did the 40-day yuezi, right? And maybe us a little bit about what that is and the concept behind that and how it's so nourishing for your body. And yeah, just a little bit about that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's a traditional practice that is common across many cultures. Being Chinese, I really gravitated towards that more traditional practice. But essentially, from a Chinese medicine perspective, when we give birth, what was once full, our womb is now empty, and it takes 6 to 8 weeks for the womb to return to its original size. And that leaves us incredibly vulnerable to cold, to disease, to potential pain, that if we do not address it in those initial weeks postpartum as our uterus comes back into its original size, we set ourselves up for long-term health imbalances. Cold in particular is of concern because cold loves the uterus, and cold over time creates a lot of hormonal imbalances. And they say that the first 40 days postpartum sets you up for 40 days of long-term health. I'm sorry, 40 years. Ooh, 40 years, not 40 days. So 40 days of postpartum sets you up for 40 years of health. And if you think about what that means, it ensures that we, when the time comes, have a smoother shift into menopause. So it's incredibly important because we lose so much blood and fluid and kidney essence, which is called Jing, through the birth process. And it's important that we restore our energy, restore our coffers, our chi, our blood, our yin, our essence through these very specific practices that are all designed to keep the body warm, keep the womb warm, and help us return to scent, which, birth is an incredible, massive release of yang, so much energy. No matter how you do it, doesn't matter how your birth unfolds, it is a massive release of energy, right? Everything that we've been gathering throughout pregnancy gets released in one fell swoop. So it's specific foods, specific practices, specific herbs that basically just help bring us back to center and really hold us, like a cocoon in this incredibly delicate state that we're in, so that we can nourish ourselves and nourish our babies and emerge from, I'd say about 3 months, that 3 month cocoon. They say 40 days, but I'm like, it's 3 months. 3 months, feeling more connected with our new identity, bonded to the baby, and at peace with this new chapter. Yeah, we need that quiet, that silence.
Yeah, I didn't do the 40 days where I didn't leave my home, but I did a lot of the soups and teas and I did the ginger baths, which I loved. I'm not sure if you did that, but the part where you're like pouring ginger on your hair and your body and you can just come out and feel so warm. It was just this amazing experience. And sometimes I want to do that now, even.
Well, I mean, you just highlighted something important. This may be the only time that you can really claim as yours to deeply recover, deeply restore yourself. And There are moments, of course, but being 6 months postpartum, I'm like, there's not a whole lot of time just for me. There is.
Yeah.
I carve out time to shower, to eat, to nourish myself, to meditate, to rest, to move my body, but there is nothing like those initial weeks postpartum where you're like, this isn't me saying I want to do this. This is me saying, like, this is a necessity. This is an absolute must. And the sweetness of that time is so, so important, so
Yeah.
necessary. And hard as it may be, like, I look back at it and I'm like, thank God I did that. I'm so glad that I stepped away from everything.
Yeah, completely. And Hannah, I know that on your channel you also talk about Bell's palsy. Can you tell us a little bit about when that happened and what happened?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I was 36 weeks pregnant, so a month before the baby came, and I woke up with my right side of my face completely paralyzed. And thankfully, as an acupuncturist, I knew what it was. So I actually woke up and I started laughing because I was like, "Oh my God!" Like, of course, right? You're already feeling a little vulnerable at that stage of pregnancy, and
Yeah.
and the paralysis was one thing, but the pain was another. It was several weeks of being in the most excruciating pain I've ever been in my life. And I remember thinking to myself, like, is this preparing me for labor? Because labor cannot be this painful, right? That being said, Bell's palsy pain was far worse because it was nerve pain, burning pain in my
Mm.
ear, across my face, down my neck and shoulder, and it was constant, 24/7. So in those few weeks, I didn't sleep for 11 days straight because I was in so much pain, and I had to stand up and walk in circles around the house all night long, just trying to distract myself from the intensity of it. And when the pain finally subsided, I mean, I was so relieved because I kept saying, I just want the pain to go away. Paralysis, I don't love, but like I can deal with that. It's surface level, but the pain ran deep. And so the pain finally subsided, but movement did not start to come back to my face until 2 months postpartum. Is that about 2 months? Yeah,
Wow.
about 2 months postpartum. And 6 months, it's still not fully recovered. And in large part, it's because labor and delivery is so depleting that there isn't the
Mhm.
same abundance of resources that can be devoted to healing something like this. For many, many people, Bell's palsy will, it's the facial nerve that's affected. And there are many different
Mm.
reasons for it. Oftentimes, it's rooted in an underlying viral infection, and essentially, it wasn't just paresis, which is the nerve ceasing to function. It was paralysis, so it killed the facial nerve completely. So it's taken about 6 months for it to start to regrow, which is why you're seeing movement now. For many people, you see recovery from Bell's palsy within a few weeks to, 2 months. But in my case, because it coincided with pregnancy and labor and delivery, it's taking longer. And again, like, it's why deep nourishment before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and after labor and delivery is so essential because, I'm breastfeeding as well. Like, we we let go of so much. And so we need those foods that are really nourishing, the herbs, the practices, the slowness to help refill our reserves so that we can heal. But yeah, little by little, it's coming back.
I can only imagine. It's so wild because I didn't realize that the risk of I didn't realize that the risk of Bell palsy is about 3 times, higher when women are pregnant, especially in the third trimester.
Yeah, our immune system is just working overtime at that point, and we're incredibly vulnerable. And, energetically speaking, we're very open as needed. We open in order to, allow the baby to come in, and our hips open, our body opens, our spirit opens. But consequently, we're also open and more vulnerable to things like this. In Chinese medicine, Bell's palsy is associated with wind, so we're more vulnerable to wind, whether it's external or internal. So yeah, much, much more common, specifically in the third trimester of pregnancy.
Yeah. Wow. And You spoke about nourishment, and I think, now that you're 6 months postpartum, it's so important for women to give themselves that time to heal and to really, invest into your long-term health. They think that, can you tell us a little bit more about what women can do? Because, we live in such a fast-paced world today. And I think as much as we want to, we know that we need to invest in our long-term health and really have that good foundational health. A lot of times girlfriends just sit together after you give birth and you're like, okay, so how are we going to get back into shape? When are we going to go? It's going to be summer again. We got to get back into shape. All that stuff. How do we tackle that? What is the balance?
It's such a funny question.
Because I think that there's what we think we know. And I remember loving the confinement foods. But my girlfriend and she was like, I gained so much weight from the confinement food because it was just so nourishing. And I really enjoyed the confinement food too. But at some point it was like, okay, we need to eat less of that pumpkin and I need to drink less of this, less of this. I forgot what it was. I think it was like the papaya soup with the fish, and it was just all together. It was like, my girlfriend was like, I need to eat less of the food because I need to get back in shape. And so we have that struggle, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm laughing. Yeah, yeah. The richness of the initial postpartum foods. I don't love really like rich fatty food, and my God, I craved it though. The bone broth, the papaya soup, the peanut soup, like
Yeah.
the sesame oil, like the oxtail, like I really craved it initially, but that's why it's important to be in tune with your body as opposed to doing what you're supposed to do. Like, can you really listen to that? Like I'm laughing. I'm with my girlfriend right now who's 7 months pregnant, and I'm helping her get prepared for postpartum. And one of the things I've told her is the necessity of just listening, right? And
Mm.
my appetite initially postpartum was ferocious. I've never eaten so much in my entire life.
Oh, me
My
too.
gosh, I've never eaten so much. But what was amazing was witnessing my body let go of so much of the weight. Within 10 days, so much of the water weight, the fluid retention, my stomach shrink back almost to exactly where it was before getting pregnant. And it's because when we really nourish ourselves, deeply nourish ourselves, we can let go of what we do not need. We feel safe, we feel secure. When there isn't the pressure to get back to a certain weight, when there's no stress or anxiety around it, we're not in that survival mode. Because when we're in survival, when we feel like we have to look a certain way, push ourselves to exercise harder, not eat as much, whatever it may be, we may lose the weight temporarily, but you will struggle to keep it off, as opposed to recognizing that like this is a phase. Enjoy the element that you're in, enjoy the season that you're in. This is a time to nourish yourself. And I really believe that, you know, those 3 months, especially postpartum, are a time to just hunker down, eat. Do not
Mm.
think about it. Do not think about pushing yourself to work out. Just don't push, don't force. Instead, like pause and listen, because there's a natural evolution, right? And you naturally start to gravitate towards lighter foods. You'll know when you need foods that are more dense, more nourishing. But again, if you get trapped and lost in that mindset of like, I need to bounce back or look a certain way, you disconnect from that deeper intuition and the deeper messages that your body is trying to send you. Yeah, like I'm not as hungry as I was. I'm still hungrier than I've ever been, but I'm not I'm not as hungry as I was. In the middle of the night, postpartum, I was getting up and like shoving like 2 granola bars in my mouth because I'm like, I just got to eat something. Oh,
Yeah.
now I don't do that. It slows down and our bodies return. But you'll know when that happens, and there's no rush. Yeah.
Mm. I love that. So I had a question. You obviously talk a lot about traditional Chinese medicine, Eastern medicine. What is the biggest myth that you think is out there that you would just like to completely rewrite?
Oh, that's interesting. I've never thought about it. It's interesting. In regards to Chinese medicine specifically, or to medicine as a whole, too?
It can be anything. Because I think even when I speak to my parents about traditional Chinese medicine, there are different things that they at their generation. So my grandparents were very much, they leaned fully into TCM, right? But with my parents, they were more skeptical. So there was a lot of different things that they thought about TCM. And then at that time, there was a lot of different voices out there, I think, So whether it's TCM or Eastern medicine, I think a lot of people have some sort of maybe preconceived notions that might be wrong that you'd like to dispel, anything.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never really thought about it. Well, I guess I have in a different way, but I think what I hear most often is that like it's kind of woo-woo, you know?
Yeah.
Like new agey, that's the word. When people call Chinese medicine new agey, I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. There's nothing new about it. This is an ancient medicine rooted in thousands and thousands and thousands of years of empirical evidence. It has been proven again and again and again and again to be effective. And so I feel like it's kind of gotten categorized in this weird, like, new age, turn of the century, spiritually driven, like esoteric, inaccessible, like, again, woo woo, kind of like it's not real, it's just for hip, it's just for, for our grandmas who believe in like the spiritual dimension or energy, right? That whole idea that because it centers around chi, that it's not real. It's not rooted in the
Yeah.
body. It's not rooted in reality. It's not rooted in, I mean, incredibly detailed science and systems. So it's that, right? This is something that's ancient and it's proven. And the reason why it has endured for thousands and thousands and thousands of years is because it works and it will
Yeah.
continue to work. What I love about Western medicine is that it's catching up. It's now catching up with the deeper impact and efficacy of Chinese medicine. Now, Western medicine is proving what we've always known, that it works. So I'm not like on one camp or the other, like Western medicine, Eastern medicine. All true medicine is the same. And I think looking for the similarities and the parallels between Western and Eastern medicine is essential because all of it is dedicated to helping people heal.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that Chinese medicine has had so much advancement. I think, and that's why my parents today, there's a lot more believing, right? Because of all the clinical studies and evidence behind traditional Chinese medicine. It's not just because it worked for my grandma, it works, but we can actually have proven science behind it. So I think that's important. And I also love that you mentioned that it's not about Eastern versus Western. I think that it really is how they can work synergistically together. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time, Hannah. And for everybody listening today, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find you?
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me on Instagram at The Balanced Healer, BALANCED, Balanced Healer. You can also find my website, thebalancedwomansystem.com. But I mean, I'd love to hear from you. I love it when women reach out and let me know what resonates with them based on conversations like these. And I mean, I really, really cherish connection above all else. And that's the amazing thing about the online community. You get to meet people, incredible women from all over the world, like you. So thank you for having me.
Amazing. Thank you. And I would love to see you at one of your retreats sometime.
Yeah, I will keep you posted.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us on the Nucci podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd love your support. Leave us a rating, drop us a review, or share it with someone who'd enjoy it too. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.